Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Crossing Ball. This is your professor, Robert Henry, and I'm here to discuss a debate between Matt Dillahunty and Michael Egnor, Dr. Michael Egnor. The question of the debate is, does God exist? Now, I'm not going to be going in too depth into this debate. I'm merely going to point out a few issues I have with the debate. I want to point out some areas where I think Dr. Egnor, I think, makes some very good points, and also show some areas where Matt is being disingenuous with his views. So without further ado, let's get into this. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so in this part, he's going to be talking. Well, Matt's going to be talking about naturalism, and what he's going to say is that some of the claims that Dr. Egnor is making reflect a very a view that is untenable, a view that reflects supernaturalism, and something that has been that has been refuted ever since the dawn of the Enlightenment and the scientific era. So let's listen to what Matt has to say about this. Hold on one second.
Something does not mean that a supernatural explanation becomes plausible as a replacement while we don't have that. If that were the case, I mean, this is absolutely fallacious, and it's the reason why we used to think Thor or Zeus threw lightning bolts, and now we don't. Anytime we don't have a scientific explanation for something that is grounded in evidence and observation, something that is testable and detectable, we don't then just get to say, there's not currently a natural explanation, therefore a supernatural one will do. You would still have to demonstrate the truth of that supernatural explanation. And we currently don't have any way, unless you know of one, and clearly you at least, I don't know how anybody could demonstrate the truth of any supernatural explanation, because all of them are God of the gaps, in the sense that here's something we don't know, we're going to insert a supernatural explanation for it.
Well, again, singularities are supernatural. They are not natural.
I would argue that the singularity as described is natural. It is the entirety. It is the entirety of the natural universe.
So what is? But then what is a singularity?
So right now,
if you're saying it's natural, what is it?
Wow,
what is it?
So first of all, you're not talking to a cosmologist, but
then why do you say it's natural?
Holy crap! Can I finish a single? Can I finish? No, evidently I cannot finish a single sentence.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm done. I have no more interest in being interrupted repeatedly every time I start an answer to you.
Well, okay, guys. Maybe.
Okay, so let me make a few comments on this. Obviously, Matt was getting very heated, although we'll see later on in the debate he pretty much does the same thing to Dr. Egnor, interrupts him several times, and Egnor doesn't display the same level of annoyance and hostility that Matt does. But anyways, Michael tries to explain to Matt that a singularity is not a natural event or a natural phenomenon. Matt just brings up Zeus throwing lightning bolts as if to believe in the natural world, which is what happens when one conflates naturalism with religion. So right there, what he's doing is he's conflating the naturalistic tendencies, or I should say, the natural sciences of the ancient world, which would be the idea that many of the natural phenomena that the ancient Greeks were experiencing and were observing were the result of some cryptozoological creature known as Zeus, who they would call a deity. That's a much different thing than what we would see as God in the Judeo-Christian sense, obviously, or in the natural theology. But Zeus is a natural being, or something like a cryptozoological being, and is conjured up to explain natural phenomena, and it's often conflated with transcendent religious experiences. Matt gets mad when Michael tries to suggest that singularity is supernatural. Here he gets mad when Michael keeps interrupting him, but he is doing so to pin Matt down on an explanation that does not involve Matt mixing up categories to give what sounds like a reasonable answer, throwing in terms like testable, evidence, historical context, God of the gaps as an assumption of supernatural. So oftentimes this is something that Matt does. This is a strategy he employs. He usually throws in terms that most people see as rational and logical terms, and he applies them to an issue that he is in favor of, and towards an issue he is not in favor of, to show that it's not testable or there is no evidence. It's clear that Matt requires a chance to ground his position in linguistically confusing categories to get a plausibly sounding but not logically plausible answer. So here Matt is trying to sound plausible, but he's not really giving a logically plausible answer. The sensible and rational conclusion here would be that Matt suggests, as far as he can tell, it is a natural phenomenon, and he disagrees with Michael. That's all he has to say. He doesn't have to get heated. He doesn't have to be emphatic about his position. All he has to say is, look, Michael, I disagree. I think that it is a natural phenomenon. But Matt takes an issue that is inconclusive and a topic of debate among scientists and scholars, and offers a definitive answer. And if one disagrees, he requires evidence to point to the fact that this level of skepticism wouldn't find any evidence compelling. So the level of skepticism that he's expressing is so high that it wouldn't matter how much evidence one were to present to Matt, it would not be compelling enough, because the evidence could never meet the standard of skepticism that he's applying to this specific issue. And yet he takes the same level of skepticism to focus it on. He doesn't take the same level of skepticism, and he doesn't focus it on his own views or his own perspectives. So he has a much less skeptical view of his own positions and applies a much higher skeptical view of others. So let's listen to another part where he gets really heated and gets very mad. Now listen to what he says right here.
I've tried to answer it every time I open you say one more fucking word while I'm trying to answer your question, and I'm done. Okay?
So, or in other words, let me spew out my rhetoric and not any logical, rational definitions. And yet he continually interrupts him when Michael suggests that what Matt said was gibberish, the equivalent to what Matt says supernaturalism is concerning Michael's appeal. So whenever Dr. Egnor, which you'll hear him say it a couple times in this debate, you should watch the whole debate. It's actually pretty good. I think Dr. Egnor does I think he does a good job. There are a couple spots I think he could have done a lot better. I think he sticks too much to the Thomistic views, but I think that he does a pretty decent job until the end. I think his closing statement is really bad. I think he could have done a lot better, because at the end, Dillahunty kind of does just throws out a congeries of different points that he disagrees with Egnor, and well, he doesn't even say just disagrees. I mean, literally says that Egnor is completely wrong on this, and Egnor doesn't do the same. He just tries to, again, convince people of his position. Matt's not interested in convincing people of his position. He's interested in poking holes in other people's position. It's much easier to poke holes in other people's position than to actually defend your own. So if anyone ever wants to debate Matt, don't ever try to get him to argue or try to poke holes in your position. Don't start with the position. Try to poke holes in his position. So I don't know, debate naturalism or something like that. That's what I would say. Let's see, one more. Okay, where are we at now? 105. Okay, so let's try this one. Matt says he talks about mathematics. He talks about physical things and black holes. Let's listen to what he has to say here. This is Egnor talking first.
All right. Let's see. I don't know where I cut out. Science uses all kinds of things that are not objects in nature. As I said, singularities, even mathematics itself, is not an object in the natural world. It's not something you can put under a microscope or see through a telescope. There are all kinds of things in science that involve abstract concepts that are not properly objects in the natural world. So there's the whole notion that science can't be used to show God's existence is nonsense.
So I would agree that mathematics are abstract concepts and that they don't exist as things in reality, and that they're used in.
Now that's an interesting point he made. He's not speaking for all scientists. People like Roger Penrose and others hold to a view that mathematics actually do represent, or as he would say, maths do represent real, objectively existing phenomena in reality. So Matt Dillahunty would not be in agreement with some people like Roger Penrose and others who would find that mathematics are real things in reality. So let's continue to hear what he says.
Science all the time, because we're taught there's a difference between abstract things and physical things. A black hole is not an abstract thing. And if we're talking about making a model and using the singularity as a model for the internals of a black hole, that in no way means that we're appealing to something that is supernatural. There's a distinction between here's something that's abstract, here's something that's conceptual, here's something that we're using as an analogous model, and here's something that is in fact beyond nature. It exists, it is beyond nature and can interact.
Not hearing anything, guys.
Okay.
Okay, there. Egnor was having some technical issues, but ultimately what Matt was saying is that he made distinction between concepts and the supernatural. He felt the concepts are he doesn't really offer a really consistent view here, because on the one hand he's saying concepts aren't real, they don't exist in reality, right? But they are mapped onto reality. They're used as in models to help us understand reality. Maybe, I don't know if he would use this term, maybe heuristic models or something like that, as opposed to supernatural claims or supernatural phenomena or entity, which are supposedly outside. So to me, I don't think it really matters if you say it's outside of reality or if it's not real. It's still saying it's outside reality. So to say a concept is not real, but it maps onto reality, to me that doesn't make much of a distinction between that and something that's just not real in the supernatural sense, at least as Matt is suggesting the supernatural would be, assuming that all that exists is natural. So Matt says he would agree that mathematics is abstract, or that they're abstract concepts and that they don't exist as things in reality, but they are used in science all the time. There's a difference between abstract things and physical things. A black hole, as he said, is not an abstract. It's not an abstract thing. And the fact that we are using singularity, which he admitted is an abstract concept, but for a natural phenomenon, and stating there is a difference between this. Here is a model of a concept, and here is something beyond nature. But how does a non-real thing, a thing that isn't real, a thing that doesn't exist, except in the mind, and if it exists in the mind as an abstract thing, then it really doesn't exist in the sense that he's saying, because the only thing that exists in the mind, which is the brain, are neurons, and how neurons work together and produce these systems and these emergent properties are still things that aren't real. So how does a non-real thing such as a concept or abstract map onto reality? For Matt, it just does. It's not real, but it's reliable, and he doesn't know why or how it is. This exposes what Matt defines as real. A real thing is a material thing. So here, even though he never really explicitly states he's a materialist, I think that this admission that concepts aren't real, and that even though they help us understand reality kind of in a heuristic way, they're not real, clearly shows that he only believes in material things. Materiality, incidentally, is a concept, by the way, Matt. So Matt's ideas seem to be complete nonsense because materiality itself is a concept. You don't empirically observe materiality. Now, materiality might be a feature that you, or quality of something you observe empirically, but materiality is still a concept that helps us understand what these features are. And the features themselves, once we conceptualize them, well, once they're conceptualized, they are a concept. And once they're a concept, they're not real. So everything he's saying makes absolutely no sense because it's not real. All right, let's go to the next clip. Where is he? Okay, what was it? 113. Yeah. So, okay, what's he talking about? Kind of looking through my notes to see what he's going to be talking about. Let's just listen to it and we'll comment on it.
I agree, but is it possible for me to make an inductive argument that isn't science?
Okay.
Oh, no, try. Try.
I'm not going to bother.
Okay. All right. So,
okay, let me go back a little bit. I think he's explaining that science to him is identical to induction. So Michael Egnor is pushing back on the idea that science is primarily or uniquely related to the natural sciences. The natural sciences, just as Gadamer, for example, the 20th century German philosopher, made a distinction between the natural sciences and the human sciences, the Geisteswissenschaft, I can't pronounce it, it's a German word, which just means human sciences. So what Egnor is suggesting is that science is a method, and the content of that method, or the material, well, I hate to use the word material, the material of that method, or the content, or the phenomena that are being investigated need to be material. So I think, let's see if he's talking about right here.
abductive is
Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go.
So you're saying science isn't constrained by methodological naturalism? Science can make appeals to this,
not.
and
Yeah,
science can.
Of course, it's not constrained by methodological naturalism. Is just philosophical naturalism. That's kind of
well. It's funny because when you talk.
Did you notice, by the way, how Matt gets really mad when you interrupt him? But he's interrupting Dr. Egnor right here, and Dr. Egnor's, he's not bothered by it. He's not upset about it because Dr. Egnor doesn't need to finish his thought in order to express the ultimate meaning of what he's saying. Matt Dillahunty needs long sentences to try to shoe in or to sort of push into this sort of Lego locking wall of nonsense. So let's listen to what he's saying right here.
Talk about what's philosophical. You just said that science points to God, and then you used Aquinas' 5 points. Well, Thomas Aquinas' 5 points aren't science; they're philosophy.
No.
Now, are they still using? So Aquinas' 5 points are science, and science can point to super. Cool.
Absolutely. They're science because there are two fundamental ways to reason. One is deductive, and the other is inductive.
Third is abductive. But.
Well, abductive is a kind of inductive. Abductive is a variant of inductive reasoning. Okay. Deductive reasoning cannot prove God's existence because you can't prove the existence of something by pure logic without some kind of evidence. And deductive reasoning doesn't use evidence in the real world. It's a purely formal logical structure. And there's an argument that Thomas Aquinas made against the ontological argument.
Right here, it's interesting. I didn't really think about this until just now. It just kind of popped in my head. But he seems to be suggesting, and really kind of interesting, you look at the Kalam, St. Anselm's ontological argument for the existence of God. Obviously, what Dr. Egnor is suggesting is that you can't prove something by deductive reasoning, because deductive reasoning isn't providing evidence for something to exist or something to be as it is stated to be. Rather, it is a way of expressing what we kind of already know or what is there. So it's a way of unpacking what is there, as opposed to inductive, which is providing evidence for either the existence of something or the way in which we're stating that thing presents itself or seems to be in terms of its essence or in terms of its structure. So let's listen a little more. I think this is really interesting.
For God's existence, that it's not a valid argument. Inductive arguments are where you take things in nature, you look at experience, you organize them, you follow.
See the little smile Dillahunty put. He's not taking any of this seriously, which is fine. If you don't agree with what someone is stating, that's fine. But I think you should be as gracious and as generous as possible in your interpretation and reading of someone else's argument, instead of having a smug smile. It's the same thing he claimed Andrew Wilson had, the same type of attitude Andrew Wilson had when he walked off from that debate. So clearly Matt hates. He can dish it out, but he can't take it. But anyway, he's dishing this out all over the place. And fortunately, Dr. Egnor is a gentleman and a scholar, and I don't think he's interested in Matt's childish antics. So let's continue.
Follow a logical sequence, and you make an inference to best explanation. That is what science does. That is what all of Aquinas' 5 ways are, is inductive arguments. It's the same kind of argument. Aquinas said there's change in nature. Darwinists say that there is evolution in organisms. Physicists say that there's a redshift. And everybody argues by logic to the inference to best explanation. The Thomistic arguments are that the inference to best explanation is the existence of God, or the existence of a supernatural or extranatural agent. So it's a scientific argument, and so it's science. It's an inductive argument, just like every other scientific theory.
Well, could we at least agree that not every inductive argument is science?
Well, it depends on how you define science. I mean,
and we're clearly defining it differently. But I was just trying to get to the one point that if you say that all scientific arguments are inductive, I would probably be on board. But if you said that all inductive arguments are science, I'm definitely not on board.
Well, again, if you...
And that's just a logical fallacy.
Well...
He loves using the term logical fallacy. But right here, you're going to see where Matt gets completely stumped. You can tell he's over his head with this in this area of the discussion with Dr. Egnor, because Dr. Egnor is just clearly superior in his understanding of philosophy to Matt.
If you define science as the study of the organized patterns in the natural world, that's what inductive arguments are.
No.
It's taking things in nature.
Inductive arguments are not the study. The study isn't the argument. If you define science as inductive arguments, then yes, you're right.
Well, science uses inductive arguments.
I agree, but is it possible for me to make an inductive argument that isn't science?
Oh, no, try. Try.
I'm not going to bother.
See, he couldn't. That's really funny right there. He, Dr. Egnor said, okay, can you produce an inductive argument that isn't scientific? And I think Matt right here saw the problems with his own view. So Matt admits he doesn't believe that everything came from nothing, and says he's leaning towards everything. Let's see, was that? Okay, yeah. No. Okay. No, I'm sorry, I'm reading ahead. Pardon me. So Michael suggests that science is merely inductive reasoning. Matt says no, that they're inductive arguments that are just arguments and not investigations or observational analyses. Michael challenges him to demonstrate an inductive argument that is not science. He can't do it. or he refuses to do it. I don't know, but he's conceding the point. So if you define science as inductive reasoning, Matt cannot demonstrate how it is not without appealing to metaphysical naturalism as a philosophical position a priori. If Matt were to offer an inductive argument, he would expose his naturalism. So the point is if he were to show an inductive argument that's not scientific, what he's doing is he's showing that he only identifies inductive arguments that are related to naturalism. And if he only embraces or accepts inductive arguments that are related to naturalism, well, that just shows that he is a philosophical naturalist, not, as he says, a methodological naturalist. One term is provisional naturalist, which is the idea that science is continually confirming that naturalism's true, that's not true. It's actually a and I hate to use the term presupposition, but it's just a worldview that a lot of scientists appeal to. It's heuristic, it's a model. All right, so it's a methodological in terms of using a model of naturalism. I won't get into some of the various definitions, but ultimately, science does not confirm naturalism. Rather, it assumes it. In some cases, I would say it doesn't have to at all, but because philosophical naturalism is the predominant philosophical theory that a lot of scientists. In fact, I'm working on a poll that I'm conducting. I'm having a poll taken up of hundreds. I don't know how many scientists from a variety of different colleges, and I'm asking them questions about what inspired them to their interest in science, and I'm looking to see if scientists were inspired because they thought that they could answer questions about the world outside of theology or outside of any type of metaphysical views. Trying to see, are they attracted to science because it seems naturalistic, as opposed to the idea that, well, a person becomes a scientist and then they're confirmed that naturalism's true. So I want to see which one's the case. Is it the case that people that become scientists are confirmed in their suspicion that naturalism is true, or are they attracted to science because it has an appearance of naturalism and they already had a naturalistic sort of predisposition toward naturalism before becoming scientists, and that's why so many scientists are naturalists, because they were naturalists before they went to science. So I think it'd be an interesting discussion. Okay, so here, this is where he admits where Matt admits that he believes that everything came from nothing. So let's listen to what he says here.
Nothing for no reason. Well, most of these I'm going to say I don't know, and I don't know that anybody else knows. I know that a lot of people assert that they know, but no, I don't think everything came from nothing for no reason. I'm currently leaning towards everything has always existed in some form or another, and that what we're seeing is change. But what caused the big?
That's a good question. So does he believe that without any evidence, or is it just kind of a notion that he is convinced? There's this word, convinced by. And what sort of ideas, what sort of concepts is he running on that's inspiring him to make that leaning towards everything has always been here and we are just seeing changes in things? So if that's his view that he leans toward, what evidence has been presented to him to suggest that this is the case? I would suspect none. I would suspect that this is just something he believes because he has a naturalistic tendency. So this is clearly showing his materialistic presuppositions. When asked what caused let me see what he says.
Big Bang? I don't know. What caused the laws of nature? I don't think anything caused them. I think they are just extant properties of the universe that we inhabit?
Extant properties. So when asked about the laws of nature, he claims they are just extant properties that just exist. When asked about the Big Bang, he says he doesn't know. So some things he'll say he doesn't know, and he's open to evidence, but other things he has an opinion on without the evidence. And that's kind of interesting, because being a skeptic as he is, you would think he would just say, I don't know, unless we have evidence to contrary. He's always saying you can't say this or that, but evidently he can. So another contradiction from Mr. Matt Dillahunty. Right, so let's see, Matt here, someone say something. Let's see, what is this? Okay, he's going to talk about how he emphatically disagrees.
Continues.
No. That was not a tap dance. That was a counter to your position.
All right. The existence of objective morality outside of human opinion.
It doesn't exist.
Obviously points. So
that you notice he just interrupted him. So when Matt hears someone say something he emphatically disagrees with, in order to prevent the interlocutor from finishing his thought, it's okay for him to interrupt, right? He wants to disrupt his interlocutor, and in this case it's Dr. Egnor. He wants to disrupt his train of thought. He wants to jar him up. He doesn't want the audience to hear what he has to say, because he's afraid it might be a powerful statement. So he has to jump in and give that little stab, that instead. But if you do that to him, he loses his mind, doesn't he? Okay, so let's go to the next clip. We're just kind of going from clip to clip here. Okay.
To this, and I'm sorry that you don't understand it. I will try one more time.
Yeah, try it again.
When you declare what a foundation of morality is, once that's done, you can compare the consequences of various actions with respect to that foundation, with respect to that goal. And that comparison can be objective in the same way that while the rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary, they didn't have to be that way, we made up the game, it is objectively against the rules for you to move your pawn forward 4 spaces at the beginning of the game. Now, you can say, is it objectively wrong? Well, no, we could have house rules, but we're talking about these rules. So before you can make any sort of claim about whether or not something is objectively wrong, you have to have a set of rules that you're going to use to compare it to. And
okay, so that's so this is Matt's definition of objectivity and morality, because he on the one hand says that morality is not objective outside of humans. It's not in the world, but he does think that they're objective when humans come together. So so humans, when humans come together and they interact and they create this thing called morality, this kind of social contract. He compares it to the rules of chess. And let's listen to what he said again. When you declare what a foundation of morality is, once that's done, you can compare the consequence of various actions with respect to that foundation, with respect to that goal, and the comparison can be objective in the same way that while the rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary, they didn't have to be that way. We made up the game, and it is objectively against the rules to move your pawn forward 4 spaces at the beginning of the game. Now, we can say it is objectively wrong. No, we can have house rules. We're talking about these rules. So before you can make any sort of claim about something that is objectively wrong, you have to have a set of rules you're going to use to compare. So here he's saying that objectivity is the instantiated sort of rules that people arbitrarily make. So this is just pushing subjectivity, the subjectivity that that Dr. Michael Egnor keeps kind of hounding him about. It's pushing it back a little bit. It's still arbitrary. It's still arbitrary, and it's still subjective, even though he doesn't like to admit that it's subjective. So let's go to the next clip.
Intrinsic purpose in the life in the universe, but what I believe
so that's what I said.
No, sir, it's not what you said, and I'm sorry that mere simple logical clarity is difficult for you. But what I believe isn't necessarily what all atheists believe. You tried to create a bucket and exclude me from it. And the only criteria for that bucket in your no true atheist fallacy is whether or not one believes there's a God. I happen to not believe that there's an intrinsic purpose bestowed upon life from external, but not every atheist agrees with that. Not every atheist agrees with.
So he gets really triggered when you suggest that that atheists or atheism share any set of beliefs, because he recognizes, and rightly so, obviously, that atheism is merely the rejection of God or the non-belief in God, and that's fine. But it's completely not unreasonable to suggest that when you do that, there might be some shared beliefs that come as a consequence of that. That's what Michael's saying. So when Michael suggests that Matt's atheism is a set of beliefs shared by all atheists, he denies it. However, Matt tries to suggest that Michael's belief in God is. So earlier, what Matt was trying to say was that Michael's belief in God is an emotive one, that the reason why he believes in God, it's emotive. He says this about a billion other people too. So I think I might be bringing this up further down. I'm not sure, but ultimately, just to kind of recap, Matt had stated after Michael had said that a billion people believe in Christianity, and they believe that God sent Christ down, and that the law is written on their hearts, and that's what a billion people believe. So what Matt is saying is he's trying to say the reason they believe that is because it's an emotional appeal. So he's actually trying to read into each of these individuals why they believe that. Now, if you do that to Matt and say, and I'm sorry, well, he was saying that they don't, I think he was trying to say they really don't believe that, or they're kind of fooling themselves or whatever. But if you try to do that to Matt, if you try to tell him, well, you're not really an atheist, or your belief is a delusion, or your non-belief is a delusion, you're ignoring something because you're trying to avoid a truth that's right there, or you act as though you're a theist. You just like to deny the part where you have an obligation to a God. He loses his mind. So he can talk and he can project his views on a billion people in the world, but as soon as you try, offer the possibility that he thinks a certain way, or try to analyze his thoughts in, I guess, some psychological way, he loses his mind. Just absolutely loses his mind. So let's listen. We got a couple more clips, and then we'll finish this up. Where are we at? 140. Let me go through here. Yeah. So this is about nominalism. This is really interesting. Nominalism and realism.
Answers to all these questions when we clearly don't is one of the cornerstones of religious thinking.
All right. Question for Michael Egnor. You said justice and mercy are universal and so must exist, but absent a mind, justice and mercy don't apply. So couldn't justice and mercy just be human inventions?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, and it gets to the question of realism versus nominalism. The idea is, are abstract concepts just things in our minds, or is there something that actually exists outside of us that is the instantiation of those abstract concepts? The difficulty with nominalism, the difficulty with the idea that there's just something in our minds, is manyfold. One of the obvious ones is that we couldn't talk about it with other people if there wasn't some kind of objective if it didn't have some objective reality. Because if I just have something in my mind and you just have something in your mind, we have to be able to communicate in the real world about what we're thinking of. So things like justice and mercy have to have some kind of actual existence somewhere in some form, or we couldn't even discuss them. Because my mind is private, your mind is private, there has to be a connection. And that really was one of Plato's arguments for the existence of a world of forms, was that there has to be some existence of these things independent of us.
I think that this is probably one of the strongest arguments that Michael makes about the the idea that concepts have to exist in the real world. They can't just exist in your mind. And if they're expressed, that expression and your reception of that expression, your hearing that and your recognition of it and understanding it suggests that that concept is not just something in a mind. Because if it's just in a mind, it can't be mapped onto reality. Because if it's just something created in my mind, then it's going to be unique to just my mind. Now, someone could argue that, well, that's just how our minds work. But I like how he addresses the nominalism versus realism, to where if what we say is only from our minds, their content and not of objectively real things, then things like justice, love would be incoherent to anyone else but ourselves, since they are not reflective of things really existing in the world. One may argue that since all minds function the same way, that's what I was saying, then they would produce these concepts similarly. So if minds, or well, brains, developed in the same way and by the same systems and the same mechanisms, then it seems likely that that they would function the same and then they would have similar content. However, this begs the question, since we are assuming something about the world, namely nature and its systems, which are abstract concepts themselves and are not empirically observed. So the very systems that we're observing in the world, that we're saying that created our mind, we're using concepts from our mind, right, to support and to justify those claims. If one claims they are empirically observed, they would have to demonstrate these systems as observed phenomena. The only ones that can are phenomenologists, and they don't hold to the sort of skepticism about God, which comes from an empirical skepticism about God being demonstrable. In other words, naturalism doesn't do this. Naturalism states that, yes, we can trust our minds because they develop by these particular systems, even though the systems that we're identifying, the systems that we're identifying are being identified and being justified by the very minds that were produced by these systems. So it's very circular, right? So for naturalism really doesn't have an answer for that. Phenomenology does, because phenomenology finds all phenomena as being equiprimordial, or in other words, what that means is that one is not based from the other or caused by the other in like a hierarchical sense. They're just there. They connect together, kind of like a tapestry or something like that. They have connection, but they're not the exact same thing. So let's listen to the final the final word from Matt, or I'm sorry, from this debate.
It makes sense to a billion people.
I'm not convinced that it does.
To you, I mean,
I'm convinced that a billion people, a good portion of them, may think it makes sense. But so I have a friend that says, if you can't explain it, you don't know it. And since you tried to do that to me at the beginning, all I'm saying is I'm glad it makes sense to you. It does not to me. And if there are 8 billion people who are convinced of it, surely one of them can put it in terms that the rest of us can understand without it sounding like a laundry list of assertions in a sermon. But
okay, so here Matt is suggesting that the billion people that find that justice and mercy is resolved in the idea of the gospel makes sense actually does not make sense to them. So he's actually stating that even though they say it makes sense to them, like when you talk about justice and mercy that we see in the gospel, it doesn't make sense to Matt. Or he's saying it doesn't make sense. Maybe it does and he's just lying, or because of his worldview or his perspective or whatever, he's blinded to it, or maybe the possibility maybe it isn't incoherent, right? So that's a possibility too. But the point is he's saying that they're stating it makes sense, but really it doesn't make sense to them. He's literally telling them what's going on in their own minds. He's literally telling them what they the authenticity of what they believe, the integrity of their beliefs, basically saying you're lying about what you're saying honestly, and that's a huge, massively presumptuous thing to say. And if they were to say that to Matt in the form of, Matt, you're really not an atheist. You say you're an atheist, but you're just lying to yourself. You're acting as though God exists. So he does the same thing to them. But he doesn't have a problem saying that. So here's another example of Matt flip-flopping on his ideas. So he hates when others do that to him, doesn't he? When they state he isn't an atheist. So he has no problem stating it to the other person. So again, I would definitely recommend that you watch this debate. Like I said, I think that Dr. Egnor is far more learned and knowledgeable, particularly about philosophy and science, than Matt is. I think Matt could probably learn a thing or two if he were to sit in a class with Dr. Egnor. Matt is, again, just good at punching holes in arguments. And in this case, he does a terrible job. The only time really Matt does any, I think, is at the end when he offers his final statements. And all he does is just rehash what he had said, but he kind of packs it into one big package, right? And unfortunately, Egnor, he's trying to appeal to just having people understand his position instead of trying to attack Matt. And when you do that, you sound too sympathetic of your own views, and you sound apologetic, and you're just trying to defend where Matt is attacking. And attack always works. I mean, if you've ever taken any martial arts, you'll know that the person that attacks, unless the person defending has a significantly higher skill level, the person attacking is usually going to get the upper hand. So I think Dr. Egnor probably would have done a better job if he would have been more attacking, but he was being very pedantic, and he should, because Matt doesn't know nearly as much as Egnor. Egnor's a far more learned man than Matt Dillahunty is. Matt Dillahunty, again, is someone who sits around and just memorizes Wikipedia pages. So I don't have a great deal of respect for his credentials, for his scholarly credentials, but I do for Egnor. Now, Matt obviously is a more skilled debater, and that's why he did a better job in many spots. But I think Egnor brought up some great points that needed to be addressed, and that's why I was doing this video to address those points. So I will see you again. We'll do another debate, or maybe we'll do a look at a movie, and maybe do a review of a really good movie that I like. But I will see you guys later. Have a good one, y'all.